Welcome everybody to our Connectivity Cafe. We've got a great lineup, in fact, for the entire day, not only Connectivity Cafe. We'd like to welcome all of our on-site guests. So welcome. Make sure you introduce yourself to whoever you're sitting next to. And also we have online guests who are managed by Omar Ansanti from Mind Designs. And today we've got a very special Connectivity Cafe Plus where we introduce experts from across the industry to give us some insights around not only regional innovation and entrepreneurship, but also industry. So it's with great pleasure that we introduce Caleb Stelle today from Amazon Web Services, so AWS. And Caleb is the Operations and Strategy Manager, and we'll be able to take you through a really great session on scaling through mechanisms. Can't wait. But before we get started, let's also work on our acknowledgement to country. So we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, the Jabberkai Yurrugunji and the Gimoy Yidinji peoples from the Nagba campus, our Smithfield campus. And we'd also like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So welcome everybody. I'm going to hand the floor over now to Caleb.
I don't think I need the microphone, right? Because I'm mic'd up right here. Perfect, yep. Thanks. All right, hi everybody. I should just mention when we get started that I do work for Amazon, but the opinions expressed are my own, and I'm not here officially on behalf of Amazon. It's important to say. All right, well, good morning. I'm really excited to share with you about scaling through mechanisms. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I've spent my entire career in operations, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And these are some proven approaches to scale through growth without sacrificing quality or consistency. So I currently, for AWS, lead learning and development for the Technical Account Manager organization. So that's a 4,000-person organization of professionals who advise AWS customers on architectural guidance and best practices. I previously led strategy and operations for APJC, which is Asia Pacific, Japan, and China regions. And before that, I led operations for Elemental Technologies, which was acquired by AWS in 2015. So through that experience, I went from a tiny 40-person startup in Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm originally from, scaling up through hyper growth with lots of investment, both VC investment and investment through the Amazon acquisition, to now being part of a global organization, one of the largest companies in the world, figuring out what works and what doesn't work for how to run your operations. So let's start out with what is a mechanism. So think about a mechanism like a machine. And so a machine it's a self-reinforcing system that solves some specific problems for your business. So like a physical machine, it has inputs, has a defined process, it has expected outputs, and it also has a feedback loop. So unlike manual processes that rely on individual effort, a mechanism creates predictable outcomes that can scale with your business. And most importantly, it needs to improve and adapt over time to your business's changing needs. So Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, famously said, "At Amazon, we don't rely on good intentions, we rely on mechanisms." And so as you look around your business, you might find those places where you're relying on the best of intentions or the heroic efforts of individuals, rather than mechanisms which give you that predictability. Why should you care about mechanisms? As businesses grow, manual processes break down. Maybe you rely on star performers who do things consistently, but employees turn over and they change jobs. Mechanisms solve these problems by adapting and scaling automatically over time. So they transition individual expertise into organizational capability. They ensure that quality doesn't suffer as you grow, and they also ensure that you proactively adapt to changing business conditions. So one of the things that I first noticed when I started leading operations at Elemental, we were still a small startup, and we had a reordering practice. So a little bit about the business is we were a software company, but we produced bespoke servers that people could put in their own private data centers, not the cloud, which was interesting prior to the acquisition. But these were for on-prem data centers. And we had a reordering process where we would order 5 or 10 units at a time, always in terms of 5 or 10 units at a time. There was no integration of demand signals. There was no integration of what are our budgetary constraints. All of those things were left out of the picture, and we were just doing simple reordering. So that was a mechanism that needed to be introduced into the reordering process. Let's create a process that is more data-driven, that we can monitor over time, that scales over time. So every effective mechanism has 5 components. So first, you've got a clear trigger condition. When does the mechanism start, and what starts out the process? You then have a defined process. So it's a clearly defined process, step by step. It shows who's responsible for what. You've got expected output. So what does the mechanism produce, and why is it there? And then you've got a measurement system to track. And the measurement system is important because it not only ensures that your mechanism is achieving the output that it's intended to achieve, but you also have a measurement system for the mechanism itself. How well is the mechanism serving your business? How well is it functioning? Within the measurement system, you need to also consider tooling. So do you have tools that help gather this data automatically for you? Because often if you rely on manual data gathering, your mechanism is going to break down over time, because once again, that's relying on manual processes. So think about your tooling so that your tooling can flow your metrics into your automated inspection. Finally, we've got your feedback loop, which is how your mechanism continually improves and adapts over time, taking in that data that you're gathering about the outputs and the performance of your mechanism so that you can make adjustments proactively over time without waiting for things to break. So mechanisms generally fall into 4 categories. You've got your input mechanisms, and they control what enters your system. So that might be like a customer qualification process. You've got process mechanisms, which govern how work gets done, and they also are similar to a project management system. Output mechanisms, which ensure quality and consistency of delivery, and then your control mechanisms, which orchestrate the various types of mechanisms and allow you to run your business with oversight through all of these mechanisms. The control mechanisms also show you where you can start building your mechanisms, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So let's start with operational reviews. This is a form of control mechanism where you've got regular health checks in your system to monitor how well your business is functioning. So one well-known example is Spotify's squad health check model. They've got a simple process which has been adopted by several companies across several industries. The mechanism conducts monthly health checks based on a simple system of red, yellow, and green flags across key metrics to then prompt deeper dive inspection into what's happening in the business. So these metrics within the operations review example, they can either be based on your outputs, the expected outputs of your mechanism, or they can be based on the mechanism health themselves. As your company grows, you might think, well, we're going to have too many KPIs. We're going to have too many performance indicators, too many metrics that we're looking at. So how do we scale that approach? And what a lot of companies use is they look only at what's yellow and red. They might dive into a couple of the green metrics just for doing spot inspection from time to time, but looking only at the things that are rising to the top and that need that attention. One of the other critical components of an operations review is that you need to have follow-up and clear ownership. So each person who's responsible for a mechanism needs to be at the operations review. If there's a yellow or red indicator for a given metric, then they need to be responsible for explaining what's happening in the business, what's driving that indicator, and then what's the plan to address it. Quality control systems are crucial as you scale because quality often begins to suffer as businesses grow. We found this when we started going back again to the server production example. When we started doubling and tripling our capacity, we struggled to maintain quality because we were having to hire new people with less experience who didn't have as much institutional knowledge. We found that our processes did not truly represent what was happening on the production floor. All of the people with really good experience were doing all of these supplementary activities that we didn't know about. They weren't represented in the training materials that people were being trained on, and so we were losing all of that institutional knowledge throughout the production process. Toyota introduced a well-known example of a quality control system with the and-on cord. You may have heard about it, where anybody in the production line has the ability, if they see a quality defect, to pull that and-on cord and to stop the production line. And the critical component here is that with the and-on cord example, everybody's empowered to do it. It's a safe thing to do because everybody recognizes that overall quality is everyone's job and everyone's mission. Then an owner is assigned to do a root cause analysis and come up with the solution for what led to the quality defect. So over time, this mechanism drives higher quality because it addresses the root cause of the quality issue. As your business grows, you can't rely on gut feelings anymore. And we've probably worked with all of these people who are very, very good in their roles and they just know things. But once again, people leave over time and you don't want to lose that valuable institutional knowledge in your businesses. So mechanisms automatically collect and analyze data to guide decision making. For example, you might create a mechanism for inventory management that tracks sales velocity. It sets reorder points, and it automatically flags items that need attention. The mechanism must answer 3 questions. What data do we need? How do we collect it? And most importantly, what actions do we need to take on these specific triggers? When we scaled from 10 systems a day to 100 systems a day, we needed to be able to rely on these mechanisms to allow us to continue operations without scaling our workforce at the same rate. And so when we had buyers who were buying the raw materials, we needed an ordering system that didn't care whether they were buying 1, 10, 100, or 1,000 units. They could still perform their role and scale with the needs of the business. So I spoke about standard operating procedures a moment ago, and these are often the basis of your mechanisms. As you saw earlier, standard operating procedures are a required part of your mechanism because they define the process that is part of your mechanism. What you need to do, though, is you need to make sure that your standard operating procedures actually reflect what's happening in real life in all of the steps. Because not only does this give you an accurate picture of all of the steps which lead to your expected outputs, but it also tells you where do we have opportunity for failure and for automation. So By training people on these standard operating procedures, you drive more consistency in your outputs, and you answer the question, who does what? When do they do it? How do they do it? How do we know it was done correctly? So an example of this might be a restaurant opening checklist. What are all of the machines you need to turn on? What are all of the things that you need to do to prepare for customers? There's also another example that we see routinely is a bathroom cleaning checklist. Who cleaned it? When did they clean it? And they sign their name next to it. So mechanisms do not need to be complicated or highly technical. They can be very, very simple but effective. And by introducing additional things such as a clipboard in a bathroom to make sure that it gets cleaned on a routine basis, and you know who to follow up with if it's not being done per the standard operating procedures prescribed. Here's a template that you can use to create your own mechanisms. Every mechanism needs 6 key elements. First of all, start with your purpose. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? This is critical in designing your mechanism because this is also going to help tell you what are the outputs that we need and do they actually solve the problem we're intending to solve. You've got your inputs, what triggers the mechanism and what resources are needed. You've then got your process steps or your SOPs, right? And then you've got your outputs. What does the mechanism produce? Along the right-hand side, we've got an example of a customer onboarding situation and what all of the different inputs, purpose, and process steps might be in that example. Your success metrics, how do we measure effectiveness? What tool will we use? And then your review cadence, how often do we evaluate and improve? And what I see so often, especially in my experience scaling from a small company to a larger company, is the metrics and inspection portion are left out. We've got standard operating procedures. It's a clearly defined process. Everybody knows what to do. They agree to do it. Job done. However, what you find over time is that when people come under time pressure or when new people are hired, you've got staff turnover, then those things that you might have relied on, you might have relied on those heroic efforts, you might have relied on those good intentions, and they break down over time. And without the metrics gathering and without the review cadence, you don't know whether or not your mechanism is still serving your business and whether it's still producing the outputs that you need. So let's go a bit deeper into that customer onboarding mechanism. So the purpose is to ensure a consistent, high-quality customer setup. The input would be a new signed contract, and the process includes welcome emails, account setup, initial training, and success planning. The output is a fully operational customer who's been trained. Some of your success metrics might include time to first value, initial customer satisfaction scores. You might also gather mechanism measurements such as the open rate of the welcome email and how long it took to enter customer information into your system. So these measurements help you understand whether you're getting the expected outputs and the relative performance of your mechanism. Once again, the metrics serve 2 purposes: to measure your outputs and also to measure the effectiveness of the mechanism so you can proactively adapt it over time. This creates a repeatable system rather than relying on individual effort. So you need to be able to answer your question consistently. How well is this mechanism serving us? And do we need to change or adapt anything within the mechanism? For implementing a new mechanism, start small. Pick one process that's causing pain in your business and mechanize it. Make sure that you've got accurate documentation around the process. Train users thoroughly, involving them in the creation of the mechanism and getting their feedback, and then monitor the results and adjust as needed. Most importantly, especially when you're introducing mechanisms, celebrate the wins. Help your staff see the value of these mechanisms. It may seem like extra steps to gather the metrics to make sure that it's done. It may seem like extra effort to go through a review cadence. but showing the success and the reliable results that a mechanism can produce can create buy-in and also help get folks excited about introducing additional mechanisms for other problem areas that you may not even see yet. As you start implementing mechanisms, here are some common pitfalls to avoid. First, don't try to mechanize everything at once. You'll overwhelm your team, they'll get unhappy, and they will not be bought into the idea of mechanisms. They'll see it negatively, and you will have much more trouble introducing new mechanisms over time. Don't create overly complex mechanisms. Simple and consistent wins over comprehensive but complicated mechanisms. And you can think about mechanisms like building blocks. So with their inputs and outputs, how can you string simple mechanisms together to create those reliable inputs and outputs across your business processes that are most critical? Don't forget the human element. Mechanisms should enable people, not replace people. And often in our businesses, we require good judgment and creativity. And so mechanisms is not synonymous to automation. Mechanisms can add a framework around the work that you do, facilitating a creative experience, but automating the things that don't require that creativity or good judgment of the people you hire. Don't set and forget your mechanisms. They need to be integrated into your review cadences. They need to be living and adapted. So each team is responsible for having the mechanisms that they grow, introduce, and sometimes retire over time. Sometimes mechanisms are no longer serving your business, and it's time for them to be retired. There are 3 keys to successful mechanism implementation. First, leadership commitment. If you're the leader, you need to show that you're invested in this transition from an SOP-driven world to a mechanism-driven world. That you need to model the behavior, you need to be consistent in how you expect the outputs to be reviewed and improving the mechanism over time. You need to have clear owners. And so what I mean by this is I've said that a team might own a mechanism, but really it's the leader of that team whose name is attached to it. That leader or their delegate attends the operational reviews. That leader or their delegate is responsible for explaining why a metric might be yellow or red and for taking the follow-up action to make sure to address whatever the root cause is. And as a leader, you need to also make sure that you're showing up for these cadences, that you are showing up to the operational review sessions, and that you're holding your teams accountable to mechanizing their work rather than relying on good intentions, and you're holding them accountable to resolving the root causes of the issues that they're seeing in their business. So mechanisms take many forms, but when implemented correctly, they drive tangible results. These are some results that I've seen in the mechanisms that my teams or teams that I work with have introduced. So in one situation, a simple customer onboarding mechanism reduced customer onboarding time from 3 weeks to 3 days. By introducing a new parts receipt quality control mechanism, we reduced production line defects by 40%. In another situation, production automation mechanism tripled our throughput by aligning all the needed inputs to allow for automated software installation and configuration. In that situation, we strung together a couple different mechanisms. One was around order inputting. The other one was around the data extract that was sent to the production facility. And then the next mechanism was related to the actual production process itself. So it was a stringing together step-by-step process to align the inputs and the outputs so that each mechanism served its specific function, and together they created higher production quality and more efficient production. Within AWS, we've got an ongoing mechanism where we track customer sentiment every week, and we quickly escalate situations that require executive attention. This drives consistent customer satisfaction within AWS, as the highest profile customers, our highest value customers, are escalated to senior management for quick resolution, removing roadblocks and bureaucracy. So now the challenge falls to you. You can get started right away by building a simple mechanism for an ongoing problem in your business. First, identify one process that's causing pain in your business. Use the template that we discussed earlier and implement it with a small team to gather data around effectiveness. This will help you adapt the mechanism if needed before launching it with the rest of the team. You can start small, show the results, celebrate the wins, and expand from there. So the goal of mechanisms is to create scalable, consistent operations that don't rely on heroic efforts. Start small, be consistent, focus on continuous improvement. I'd love to hear any questions that you have, or if you've had experience implementing mechanisms in your businesses.
Yeah. One of the real challenges, I guess, for a lot of small businesses, I'll speak for myself. I'm a sole trader, and then every so often I might be in a joint venture. So everything you said makes sense, premised on the fact that you have a small team. So, I mean, ways to get around this issue if you're just a sole trader or you have informal relationships. I just wonder if you've got any ideas about that, because sometimes we tend to do ad hoc things. You know, I used to be part of a big team in a corporate land, but when you're a small player or you're just an entrepreneur, you only know what you see in the mirror, so to speak. So just any thoughts about how you can...
Yeah, do you think the root of the problem, is it because you've got different folks who are coming into the process all the time and it's hard to have that consistency? Is that kind of the root of it that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things. So what I've experienced is that if you can make it part of the process, and if you can say, this is the way that we do this thing, and if you can do that with the partners that you bring in, that can help you create more consistency with your mechanisms for the things that are important. And we can't mechanize everything, right? That becomes overwhelming. It becomes an administrative burden and unsustainable. So I would suggest finding the things that are most critical to mechanize and really being deliberate up front to say, this is the way, if we're going to work together, this is the way that we need to do this specific thing. And that can help you really prioritize and focus your attention on what's important to mechanize, rather than having everything be predictable and mechanized, especially when you're bringing different players into it. It might also become one of the requirements of your mechanism. So as you go through the mechanism design process, think about what the existing process is. Where are people starting? And can you meet them where they're at? So rather than relying on people adapting to your process, can you understand where they're starting? And how can you introduce a mechanism which meets them where they already are? So it's not extra effort, it's just part of the way of doing business.
First of all, really, really good presentation. Thank you very much. That was awesome. This has kind of been my lifeblood for the last 30 years, but I'll just keep this really simple.
Yeah.
Mechanisms and the way that you've done it is, I'm sorry, just brilliant. There is two very small questions.
Yeah.
The first is, what is the minimum size of, like, the number of employees of a company that you would recommend this for?
Yeah.
I can see it scaling to like unlimited.
Yeah.
And the second is, when you're converting things into mechanisms, it's usually converting responsibility into accountability.
Yeah.
And I know that when I was converting organizations and large organizations, they get the feeling that they're not being trusted anymore. And so, you know, it's all about, you know, explain it. Do you see that as a bit of an issue, or have you got processes in there to try and minimize that?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
That's a real concern because sometimes it might feel like intrusive oversight, right? You want to measure all of these things around the work that I'm producing so that, you can build a case to fire me or something like that, right? You don't trust me to do a good job. And over time, I think one of the things I'd really suggest is try to embed this into your culture for how you do work and get, I think a success indicator there might be if somebody on your team, not you, but if somebody on your team asks, hey, are we relying on a mechanism or are we relying on good intentions here? And one quick way to start is to incorporate something like retrospectives in your work, right? So you can look at, let's get to the end of a project or the end of something that we did. Let's celebrate the wins. Let's talk about what didn't go well in this process. And that might be a good prompt for a conversation to say, were we relying on good intentions in this situation, or were we relying on a mechanism? Did a mechanism fail us? That's one thing. I think it's a powerful shift that mechanisms allow, because it allows you to shift the perspective away from this person failed and therefore we failed to get the outputs, and instead allows you to have the conversation, does the mechanism need to be updated? Did the mechanism fail us? So we thought that the mechanism was going to keep people going down this path and ensure that we followed this consistent process. But we can see now that there was a deviation. So let's brainstorm together. How can we improve the mechanism to get the outputs? And so I find that it shifts the blame away from individual employees and shifts it to the mechanism. Let's work on making this mechanism better. So that's, I think, one way that you can kind of counteract the big brother oversight effect of introducing mechanisms. In terms of the size of company, I really think any size, whether it's just an individual or whether it's a small team. I've got on my immediate team, I've got 14 people. And we have mechanisms within our team just in the way that we work. So for example, and we're getting a lot of really great tools with publicly available AI tools to do some really cool automation to integrate into our mechanism. So one of our mechanisms that we're building right now is we have struggled with adhering to global English standards. So we produce a lot of training. We don't always have time to translate the training. And so how do we ensure that we build to the global English quality standards? And we have relied, unfortunately, on best intentions for far too long. And so we get to the end and somebody asks, hey, did you do the global English check? Oh, no, I didn't. This was a really rushed project and I needed to get it out the door. Well, that gives you the opportunity to say, it sounds like we're relying on good intentions here and we need to have a better mechanism. And so we're adjusting the workflow to say, all of our work as we're working needs to be saved in one specific location. And then we've got, an AI agent that we have given access to that location, and it can automatically read all of the documents and give global English suggestions to make sure that it's taken care of as part of the production process rather than a last step that we hurry up and try to finish. And so in my experience, it doesn't matter how big the team is because you can introduce simple or more complex tool-driven mechanisms.
Hi, thank you so much for such a great presentation. It really resonated with me, who supports small businesses in regional and rural Queensland. And there's high recruitment and low retention. So the concept of mechanisms actually retains a lot of the intelligence and useful information for, that tends to go when people retire after 40 years. We are finding that 40 years worth of hardcore in business intelligence is going away.
Yep.
Now, trying to translate this to, for example, government departments, how do you suggest we pitch the idea of this is a very simple fix to a very complex problem? Thank you.
Yeah. one of the things that you can use in terms of trying to get buy-in, and especially in a governmental organization, is you might talk about compliance, right? So often compliance drivers are, how do you know that you can get this consistent output over time? So you're telling me you've got a process that gives this output, but how do you know that you will consistently give that process output over time? And so you may start with compliance. And once again, you may also just solicit some responses from the customer to say, tell me about some failures you had recently. What didn't go well? And tell me a little bit about that. Did you do a root cause analysis? Do you know what didn't work in your system? And start with a problem, because that can then also help align you on the same side of the table. Oh, you've got this problem. Let me help you look at that problem and see what we might do to solve that problem in a more consistent, durable, and scalable way. And so that could be a way to shift the conversation, especially if the problem is related to compliance, where it's not a like to have, but it's a need to have. Mm-hmm.
I think we got one more question online. Liz, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Hey, mate. Great presentation. Amazon would be proud. Loved that example. I already have my hand raised, but you went there with the AI example. Can you, maybe for startups, founders, entrepreneurs, can you think of any other examples of AI-driven mechanisms that we could go away and do in our business? Things that you've seen work well, and any tips on, when do you put AI in your product? Do you look straight from the purpose? Like, do you build that consideration into every step of creating a mechanism? How do you do it?
Yeah. One of the things that where we are right now with LLMs is you might ask the same question 10 times and you might get 10 different responses each time. And so I really suggest you carefully consider how you introduce AI into your process and into your mechanisms. One of the things that we're thinking about with AI is in terms of reporting. So taking some manual reporting, which requires you to say, hey, this person is not meeting their training requirements, for example. This is a use case that we're looking at, where you might today require a manual data pull, and then you've got an email, you've got to look through the data and then send a leader a report about what's happening in their org and what they should be paying attention to. There, you can absolutely mechanize that these days with an agent. So you can limit, for example, the context window within your AI to say, look only at these specific data sets in order to make your decisions, and then go and tell this person. So there's going to be some announcements coming up at reInvent, which make these sorts of tools available for individuals that people can just get started on right away at AWS. So I really do recommend you tune into the AI launches that are going to happen, that AWS is going to launch at reInvent, because there's some exciting things coming. Those are some ways that you can get started quickly. And even if it's part of the checklist, like, did you set up this agent, or did you look at the output of that agent? Those are the types of things I think that you can start small with. Once again, I think that looking at a fully automated workflow is not going to be the key to success, especially with new technology. And really try to limit the use case where it can consistently serve you in your mechanism, rather than trying to do too much automation at once, because you could add on to the automation over time. Once again, checking with your outputs to make sure that your outputs are still consistent and of the quality that you would expect. But those are some things that you can do, especially with AI and new technology, is I would really suggest limiting the way that you're integrating it into your mechanism into a very small portion of it and then expanding from there.
Thanks.
Just checking to see if there's any other questions. Looks like we're all great. So thanks again. Let's put our hands together, and thanks, Caleb, very much for a great presentation. Just a reminder, we're here for some networking now. So if you've got some more questions or if you'd like to chat to some of our founders that are in the room, please feel free to stay around. We also have today a luncheon. So we'll be launching a industry roundtable lunch today from 12 to 1 o'clock and launching our Queensland AI Consortium white paper, which we've just been informed is now no longer a white paper. It's actually going to be published in a journal called Machine Leadership. So round of applause to everybody. Really excited. And also what's more exciting is that we're going to be working on our 2026, 2027 paper, and would love to hear who would like to contribute. And also we've built a map, an interactive ecosystem map, where we can start to map out in Queensland where we have this incredible talent and connect AI researchers, industry, and startups all together. So we're launching that. Hopefully that was a bit of a teaser for you to stay. But also thanks to Delish, Dave's over there setting up lunch. We're also putting on lunch. And so please, stay around for lunch and join us for that roundtable. Would love to have your insights and your thoughts about AI in Queensland. And also we have our end of year. I'm just doing one little plug for our end of year event, which will be next Friday, not this Friday, the following Friday. And we're all going over to Distill in the Hill to support our local. So we'll be sending out all the invites this week. We'd like to invite you all and to thank you for all your contributions to the ecosystem. So that will be our last end of year event for our JCU Founders and Residents portfolio. So please feel free to stay, network. Hi, John.
Yeah, just a quick plug. This Friday there's Forum for Business Growth, which Sam and a number of people have presented in the past. So we've got a special presenter talking about the economy next year, Pete Faulkner, who's quite a distinguished expert. I'll use that word expert in inverted commas, but anybody who's keen to know what's happening with the economy. There's Tony here as well. So we certainly encourage anyone, if they'd like to come to the Forum for Business Growth. It's this Friday at 12 o'clock at the Oka restaurant in town. So anything to people can book online for. I'd like to see as many people. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Anyone else like to plug anything that they're working on or looking for? Anybody? Yep.
I just want to say, Sam is an absolute powerhouse, and I'm not sure if people kind of plug her, but this is Sam's plug right now. So please, put your hands together.
Thanks, Andrew. You'll send me the invoice later. Thanks, Paloma AI. So I just wanted to double check if there's any other updates. Please feel free to hang around, connect. We've got a lovely year ahead, and we've had some incredible milestones and lots of success this year. So look forward to seeing more. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody, and thank you. Thank you. Thank you.